My name is Dave Baldwin, the creator of the Escape 8 to 5 online course. I use my combined background in technology, marketing, and finance to create holistic systems that allow businesses to grow. And today I want to talk about hiring your first virtual assistant. This is a pathway that I think a lot of people run into at some point. You get to the point where you're busy, your calendar fills up, you don't have time to do everything yourself like you've done always before, and it can be an exciting point in time. And there's a lot of ways to get it wrong. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I've found in my experience. It's really important for you to ask yourself some questions for you to go through before you pull the trigger and hire that virtual assistant. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, how clear are you about what needs to stay on your plate and what needs to be handled by you and you alone? One of the things that I see happening a lot of times with people that hire virtual assistants is they're so focused on what they want off their plate that they don't ask the other question. They don't ask what's actually a more important question, which is what actually needs to stay on your plate. What can you not delegate to a virtual assistant? And there's a couple of important reasons for this. One is that what has to stay on your plate in a lot of ways governs is defined by what the value is that you bring to your clients. There's advice that you need to be able to give, there's decisions you need to make. There are certain things that are simply not appropriate to delegate. And I've found that a lot of times business owners that hire in an undisciplined fashion, whether it's a virtual assistant or an employee, the tendency is to just kind of start delegating in a careless manner, and important decisions that really should be made at a higher level end up getting just basically left to an assistant or somebody who shouldn't be making those decisions, to the detriment of the business. And sometimes the consequences can be pretty severe. The second question I want you to ask is, how efficiently are you currently using your time right now? Are you working as smart as you could be? Or is there a lot of multitasking, jumping all over the place, haphazard, diving into your day without a plan? And I'm going to suggest, if you're not using the time that you have well, perhaps it might be a better plan to think about how can you streamline, how can you get yourself organized first before you hire a virtual assistant. Because if you have an inefficient and a disorganized workflow with one person, getting another person involved is not going to make that better. It's going to make the situation worse more often than not. The other question is, how are you choosing what to delegate? And I'm going to be blunt about this question. What I'm really getting at: are you deciding what to delegate based on what the business needs? Are you deciding what needs to be off your plate, driven by what needs to be on your plate first? Are you prioritizing that way? Or are you delegating what you simply don't feel like doing? I know I've been guilty of it. I know I've seen other business owners do the same thing, where the tendency is to say, man, I hate doing bookkeeping, sending emails, entering in receipts, or whatever it is. Like, I hate doing this stuff. And I'd rather just pay somebody else to do it. Perfectly legitimate to pay someone else to do things that someone else could easily be handling. But the question is, what are you going to do with the extra time once you've got more time back in your schedule? And so this kind of comes back to that first question of how clear you are about what's on your plate and how efficiently are you using your time. Because if you don't have a good workflow and you don't have a clear picture of what you're supposed to be focused on, what I see happen in those cases is that people will hire a virtual assistant and frankly will just screw around more. They'll waste time and scroll on social media, and instead of using the extra time to actually grow the business and do those critical activities which need to be mapped out in advance. Next question I want you to ask is, how high a skill level are you willing and able to pay for? Just like in the IT world, they say there's the fast, cheap, and good triangle. Same principle applies to hiring a virtual assistant. You have got to ask yourself, if you need somebody with a high skill level to be able to handle higher level tasks, you need to be prepared to pay more to get somebody at that high skill level. On the other hand, if you've got to keep costs low because money is tight, I get that. And then the question is, how are you going to organize yourself so that you can make efficient use of somebody that you can get at a low hourly rate? Because essentially it means you're going to have to break down the tasks into simple, one by one a organized workflow in order for somebody that doesn't have as high a skill level to be able to execute them. And you kind of have to be willing to decide what that trade-off is. Would you rather pay more and get somebody who's at a higher skill level that doesn't need as much hand holding? Or would you rather put more of the time in on the front end on your own, kind of getting things organized, knowing that it's going to save you money? All depends on where your cash flow is in your business. How clear are you about your competitive advantage? One of the things that a lot of small business owners don't really do enough, make enough effort figuring out is what is the driver to your to what's really going to grow your business. What do you do better than anyone else does? One of the things that happens if you delegate to a virtual assistant before you have a clear enough picture of your competitive advantage is you might be taking underpriced work, working for the wrong clients, taking on work that doesn't really fit your business model. And again, this is a situation where you bring in you essentially end up building a team around something that isn't really part of your core business model. So you're not going to make efficient use of your virtual assistant. You're not going to be growing a business. You're actually going to get yourself further stuck and pigeonholed. And unfortunately, what happens if you hire virtual assistants to do things that aren't good, don't make sense to be in your business, you're more likely to lose money and burn additional cash and end up with work that still comes back onto your plate at the end of the day. So really want to think about what's the competitive advantage of your business, and have you really figured that out yet? If you haven't, if it's murky, you may want to at least put a little bit more time and energy into getting a better definition of that before you move forward with hiring a virtual assistant. How certain are you that you are charging enough for the services that you're doing? This can be a major issue if you hire a virtual assistant to help you with underpriced work. If you're under market, well, part of the problem that's going to happen is you're going to end up getting financially squeezed, because if you can't hire anyone to help you do the work that you need to do at the right rates that you need to charge, you're going to end up basically in the worst of both worlds. So one of the things you have to look at is, what are your competitors charging for similar prices? What does the market bear for your service? And if you're only half as much as everybody else, I'm going to suggest that you really rethink whether it's time to hire a virtual assistant, or if what you need to do first is raise your prices, get your service more in line with the market, and then reevaluate the decision to hire a virtual assistant. Because what might end up happening is you might end up just getting rid of a bunch of low paying clients. And that might solve the problem of putting time back in your schedule in a better way than hiring somebody for something that's simply not a fit. How much money do you expect to have in the bank? How much more money do you expect to have in the bank as a result of hiring a virtual assistant every month? One of the things now, I understand the first couple of months when you hire somebody new, there's going to be a financial investment into that person, and you're not going to see an immediate financial return. I get that. You've got to prime the pump. There's no risk, no reward. But if you think about what is the expected financial return if you hire somebody that works out really well over a year, 2 years, 3 years, where do you expect extra money to come from? Are you hoping to get more clients as a result of you doing more of the things that need to be on your plate? Are you hoping to be able to charge more from your existing clients? Are you hoping to develop ancillary revenue streams? Everything comes back to those first two questions I asked in the beginning of this video about what do you see as needs to be on your plate, and how efficiently are you using your time? Because essentially the question is, when you hire a virtual assistant, how is that going to help your business make more money? And in fact, how much more money every month is it expected to help you make? If you don't have at least some estimated dollar figure, I'm going to invite you to rethink that before you hire a virtual assistant. Next, what is your past experience level with management and delegation? Have you ever been in a management role at another job before, even an assistant manager at a restaurant or anything like that? Have you been responsible for work that you didn't do? Have you ever been in a kind of role where your primary job was assigning and delegating tasks to other people and making sure that everybody was working and hitting their deadlines? If this is your first foray into the management field, just be aware that you're going to have a learning curve, and you're going to have to be patient with yourself and your own learning curve, because you're going to get it wrong. So just kind of think about your past experience level. I'm not saying that's a reason not to do it, but I would also maybe consider thinking about either taking some courses online. There's plenty of things you can do, like invest in your education. Learning how to manage people is a whole different skill. knowing how to do a task and learning how to manage somebody who does a task are two totally different things. Anyone who's ever been promoted to a management role can tell you. Next, when and how will you know whether or not you've hired the right VA? That's one thing you got to ask yourself is how long is the measurement period? So is it going to be 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? How long is it going to take for you to be able to make a decision to say, okay, I know I've picked the right person, or at what point are you going to know that you've hired the wrong person? And what needles are you going to watch? What dashboard needles are you going to watch? Or what are the things that you're going to look for? What are they behavioral indicators? I mean, one example might be, do people get things done on time? Do they follow directions? Do they come back and ask you questions that you've already answered? What are those things that are going to really rub you the wrong way personally if you hire a virtual assistant? What's going to make you unhappy? And then conversely, what's going to make you happy? And how long is it going to take for you to really figure it out? And I think you should initially get a pretty clear sense in the beginning, but you've also got to bake things in a bit, because somebody can do a great job, knock it out of the park for 2 or 3 weeks. It doesn't necessarily mean they can sustain that for the long term. So you kind of have to figure out what your philosophy is on that, but at least go in having an idea of what is your, how long of an amount of time are you going to wait before you decide I've hired the right VA or I've not, and kind of just go in with that mindset. Next is, how much money are you willing to risk to find out that you hired the wrong VA? So this should be part of your thought process for the preceding question. And it's also got to be factoring in, your cash flow of your business and your general risk tolerance level. Are you willing to spend $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 just to find out that you've hired the wrong person? And if so, what do you need to learn to still make that investment of money worthwhile just for the learning experience? Remember what I said about before about how if you don't have a lot of experience with management and delegation, it's okay to put a few grand into a VA that doesn't work out if you think about that money as a tuition payment in your self-education. So let's say, you spend 10 or 20 grand hiring a VA that doesn't work out. Great. What can you learn from the experience that makes you glad that you spent that money, even though you didn't get a person you needed? And last but not least, what's your plan if you hire somebody who quits after 6 months or a year? If you're going into this thinking, I really need to hire somebody who's going to stick around. Well, guess what? You will never be able to guarantee that anybody is going to stick around. Just doesn't happen, especially in today's world where you've got quiet quitting and the great resignation, et cetera. People get sick. People have life circumstances that change. It's a fact of life. It's a cost of doing business. You got to have it. Because anytime somebody quits or decides to go do something else, everything's going to be back on your plate again as the business owner. So it's up to you to figure out what that plan B is. So those are a few questions I strongly urge you to think about if you're in the process of thinking about hiring a virtual assistant, whether you've already hired one, thinking about hiring one, needing to hire one. I really feel you will make a better decision. You'll have a better hiring process if you put in the work and really sit down and spend some time thinking about the questions that I shared with you today. To learn more about my business, Baldwin Systems, check out davebaldwin.com, dave-baldwin.com, and don't forget the hyphen. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under the Baldwin Systems handle, and on TikTok at Escape 8 to 5. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more tips and strategies for growing your business. Till next time.